Hey guys, how's it going? So I hope you're having a good day today, and I hope all is well with you. So we're going to do another radio story today. So this is going to be our second radio story. And this is another radio story about Detroit radio. So today we're going to talk about why 97.1 K-Rock, 97.1 Extreme Radio failed. And I'll kind of start it out with going back through a brief history of the signal itself, and then we'll kind of let things develop from there. So 97.1 signed on I believe it was in the late 1940s. Now, the FM band was basically in its infancy at this point, and I believe their call letters were originally WENA, and they were originally on 96.9 FM, but then they moved to 97.1. And, they had a very tiny audience up until we got into the 60s. And like a lot of FM stations around that time, they played beautiful music. And by then they were WWJ-FM. And WWJ-FM, throughout the 1970s into the early 80s, were a beautiful music format. Around the early 80s, the call letters were changed from WWJ to WJOI as Joy 97 to differentiate itself from news radio WWJ. And there was a commercial, and you can find it on YouTube, where they advertised both stations. And I think the guy says something like FM 97 when I need to relax, AM 950 when I need to know the news. Well, WJOI's ratings were starting to taper off by the early 90s. They had phased most of the beautiful music out, and some of the music of your life sort of music, like the Barbra Streisands and the Melissa Manchesters and the Carpenters and stuff like that, and started adding more mainstream adult contemporary artists, and even mixing it with smooth jazz, even, I think, a little bit, if I remember right. Well, the ratings had taken a fall, and WNIC was solidly beating them in the ratings. So it was decided that it was time for a change. So I think it was in the summer of 1994, over a weekend, the station stunted with "We Will Rock You" by Queen. And then the station became Star 97 FM, the greatest hits of the 70s. And it was a 70s music format with kind of a classic rock lean. I mean, once in a while you would hear something from like about 1980 or 1981, or you might hear something from like 1969 or something like that. But the 70s format was a little bit of a fad format. A few markets did it, but it wasn't quite as widespread as like Jammin' Oldies was or something like that. I know 104.3 in Baltimore, did an all 70s format for a while. But anyway, like a lot of fad formats, Star 97 started to burn itself out. What's notable at one point is, for a brief while, they carried Imus in the morning. But even putting Don Imus on there really wasn't helping the station much. And by the winter of 1997, basically Star 97 had ran its course. For years, Howard Stern had been trying to get into the Detroit radio market, but for whatever reason or another, it just never seemed to work out. I believe they were trying to get him on WLLZ at one point, but this is what I'm told, is that it fell through. I don't know the whole story, honestly, but it said that things just didn't work out. Well, with CBS Infinity now at the helm, they figured it was the perfect time to bring Howard Stern into the radio market and launch a new format on 97.1, what they did was they tried to do a carbon copy of 92.3 K-Rock in New York and bring it to Detroit. And I believe it was I think it was about March or April of 1997, Star 97 gave way to 97 Rock. And basically, it was weird because they were modeling it after K-Rock, but they called it 97 Rock for a brief while. And I remember one of their promos was from the top of the Howard Stern building. This is 97 Rock, WIST, Detroit. And a few months later, they changed the name to 97.1 K-Rock and changed the call letters to WKRK, which stood for K-Rock, of course. And this is kind of where things start to get interesting. The problem was that they really didn't do a lot of local research, in my opinion. They basically did a copy and paste of 92.3 in New York, as I said. But they didn't do a lot of local research, and they didn't research a lot of local, what I would call something that would be more catered towards Detroit, like tastes and everything. Because in different radio markets and in different parts of the country, musical tastes can be just slightly different, and you have to kind of custom tailor your stations to that. Well, they didn't do that. What they did was they put like a generic rock format on, and they really, I believe they believe that Howard Stern would carry the whole station, that people would tune out Drew and Mike, and they would make the switch to 97.1 and listen to Howard Stern. And throughout the day, you would have the hosts on the station mentioning things from the Howard Stern show. Oh, did you hear what Howard said today? Or, Howard said this, and Robin remarked and said this. And what also they started doing at the same time was they kept taking cheap shots at WRIF. And at first it might have been a little bit humorous, but it got old pretty fast. I mean, they would air on-air promos and liners that, slam WRIF. And even the DJs would slam WRIF, Riff sucks, is like what they really said. And they would have these goofy liners, like something like so-and-so went up and cut the transmitter line to WRIF. And I think what the coup de grace really was when they hired some voice actor to portray Arthur Penhallow, or Arthur P. And they got the voice actually pretty close. But like, one of the liners, and this isn't my words, by the way, this is what actually aired, was, "I'm getting really old, baby." And that sounded horrible, I know. But I really think that was one of the things that did the station in. But after so long, that riff sucks, I mean, that just got old after a while. And the ratings showed it. So with the station not doing the best, they relaunched the station in August of 1998. While keeping the Howard Stern show, they renamed the station 97.1 Extreme Radio. And it was like a harder-edged alternative rock format. And honestly, I thought the idea was pretty interesting, to tell you the truth. Now, I don't know if this format was meant to be permanent, or if the plan was all along for the station to eventually flip to talk. I'm not sure, to be honest with you, or if it was a way to throw competition off or something. But anyway, with Extreme Radio, they would air liners like, we're a station, like, finally a station that's not stuck in the past. And they would parody songs, like, I remember one liner sort of took a swipe at, like, Warren's Cherry Pie, for example. And a lot of the music they were playing like Green Day, Rage Against the Machine, Hole, White Zombie, like Pearl Jam and Stone Temple Pilots, Primus, stuff like that. And again, it really failed to reverse the station's fortunes. And again, I'm not sure if Extreme Radio was ever meant to be permanent. That I don't know. But the station ran all music through the fall of I'm trying to think now, through the fall of 1998. But then the station it was clear that the station was going to be evolving into a talk format. They brought in Steve Dahl from Chicago. Dahl had been a fixture in Detroit radio for a time in maybe about the mid 70s to late 70s before he went off to Chicago. And they were thinking a lot of radio listeners would have remembered him. Well, his show ended up not doing so well. And I remember hearing this show, and the dude sounded like he was reading a newspaper. That's exactly what it sounded like. I mean, a few detractors to the show were calling him Steve Dull, which I kind of thought it was. So they were airing Howard Stern and Steve Dahl, but they were airing music other parts of the day. And by spring, they had eventually phased the whole rock format out, and the station evolved into talk, and eventually they changed the name just to 97.1 FM Talk, retaining the WKRK call letters until 2007. But I thought I would put Extreme Radio and K-Rock together, since it wasn't the same, but it was kind of the same kind of thing. But the point of the story is if you're going to launch a radio station, you need to custom tailor it to the market. And you can't just expect one personality or a syndicated show to carry the whole station for you. That's just not going to work. And whoever had that idea, I think, was extremely short-sighted. I mean, you weren't going to topple WRIF with, just saying riff sucks all the time and making fun of it and just airing a generic sounding rock format that really wasn't custom tailored for Detroit. So I don't know who made that decision, but I assume they're probably selling t-shirts and flags at a flea market now. I have no idea. But bottom line is K-Rock didn't work. Constantly slamming the other station annoyed people. And that pretty much doomed 97.1's reign as a rock station. Well, guys, that's going to do it for me. I want to thank you so much for watching. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. And if you want to hear more radio stories, let me know. Until next time, take care.